Evolution of a Nobody, Book 2. Chapters 30 and 31, The Birthday That Wasn't. Albert lost track of the number of times he listened to that moment. Sometimes he watched, sometimes he only listened, but he couldn't get enough until at last he saw the clock on the bottom right corner of the screen read 4:30 in the morning. Only then did he rise to his feet and step with care around the sleeping pair and out into the hall. He held the knob to the open position and pulled the door behind him, then slowly turned the knob back so that it returned to the closed position without a sound. It was dark in the hall, and he slid his hand along the wall until he found the switch and flicked it up to turn on the dim yellow light overhead. That shouldn't wake her, but she should be up soon. I've got just enough time. He thought, and with great haste his feet carried him into the kitchen area. He cracked open the refrigerator as quietly as he could and pulled out a gray cardboard carton of large eggs, then a plastic-sealed container of bacon, a cardboard jug of pulp-filled orange juice. Then he pulled out a pan which he set down on the stove top. He turned the switch to click to low temperature and returned to the refrigerator for some milk, pulled out a slightly larger bowl than needed, cracked some eggs, then poured about 1/8 of a cup of milk into the bowl with the eggs. He then began to hum. She came back, she remembered, she came back, she remembered. He didn't really make them into real words. He only hummed it and bounced a bit on his feet while he whipped at the eggs with a fork. The milk and egg began to blend into a light yellow liquid, and his eyes sparkled with contentment while he worked. Butter, yes, a little butter on the pan. I don't want anything to stick. He paused his humming to mutter, grabbed a stick and cut a slice to drop down into the pan where it almost immediately began to melt. As it slid around, he got out another pan and turned it higher than the eggs, a quick spray down with non-stick stuff, and he was laying bacon down to fry. Bacon and eggs? Maybe not the breakfast of champions, but there's nothing better except more of both, he said and licked his lips. Oh, right, I need more, he realized an instant later. I'll make up some excuse for making more and just keep a plate heated for Raz and Liala. She missed my last 2 birthdays, but she's not going to miss this one. She actually ate here for once, he thought, and bounced up and down on his heels. How many times he'd made a dinner and set it out and found it left untouched the next day until he finally gave up. He'd lost count. Finally, after all this time, he said and turned to look at the window. The blinds were down, so he reached back and turned the clear plastic stick which would raise the little metallic slits and let some light in when the sun came up. The dim light he had in the kitchen was plenty for now, but there was no substitute for the sun. He flipped the bacon while it sizzled and then added more eggs and milk to the mix to feed everybody in the apartment. Maybe Raziel won't even have to imitate her. No, I shouldn't ruin my birthday like that. Besides, Raz has worked hard. It would be a slap in the face after she put up with everything. Albert considered, then reconsidered that option and flipped the bacon again. It would crisp up soon. He turned his attention to the eggs and he began to stir it with a wooden spoon, very, very slowly. After almost 10 minutes of back and forth, he removed the bacon from the pan and placed it on a paper towel on a plate. After flipping the burner off, he blew lightly over the bacon strips to cool them from their remaining sizzle. "Now for the piece de resistance," he softly exclaimed, and taking 3 of the strips, he began to break them into very small pieces and drop them into the scrambled eggs he was preparing. Only then did he turn up the heat on the burner with the eggs and stir with greater speed, spreading the bits throughout the feast of a breakfast until the eggs became large, solid, and fluffy. He quickly grabbed some glass plates, turned the heat to low again, and scooped the eggs out in 2 servings and put the plates on the stovetop to keep them warm. He then poured 2 glasses of juice, and as one final touch he set about making coffee. She always said I made coffee strong enough to wake the dead to come have a cup. He grinned a little and hummed as he bounced contentedly on his heels while the sizzling sound of boiling water began, and the drips of dark liquid began moments later. He looked toward the window. Little beams of light were starting to creep into his home, spreading out and rising with the sun. I know she'll have to go to work soon, but today we can have breakfast. I'm not going to work today. Not going to school. I can wait for her to come back too. I'll have to warn my friends to take care. Albert's face was bright with excitement that had his hands shaking when he poured 2 cups and set them beside the juice. The pot clinked against the thick glass cups, and the rich aroma of coffee filled the room. He set the creamer down on the counter, then with a long, reluctant look at his own cup, he went to the table and sat down. "Any minute now," he said with an almost childish squeal, as the beam of light from outside rose beyond the countertop and raced across the carpet to the far side of the apartment, and little by little the dark place filled with natural light. "Any minute now," he said, and sucked in his breath. Early rising defined her, so his having made his own birthday breakfast rather than sleeping in would surprise her to no end. He could already see it. Her eyes lighting up, the morning sun catching her honey-golden hair, her mouth opening when he surprised her by already being awake and at the table. "I made us breakfast, Mom." He rehearsed the line and looked over his shoulder to where the warm food waited for loving hands to carry it to the table. "She'll come out, we'll carry our food to the table, have coffee, and talk." "Any minute now," he said under his breath, and regretted that there wasn't a clock to look at to tell him the time. He could only guess it, as the sunlight continued to fill up the room like the waiting coffee filled the waiting cups. Albert folded one hand over the other and kept his back straight and looked straight ahead toward the opening to the hall that led from one room to another. "Any minute." Any minute became every minute, and Albert began to tap his finger on the table, counting out the seconds and simply waiting. Finally, after an interminable time, he heard the click of a door opening. He shot to his feet. "Mom! I made breakfast!" The smile that spread over his face was only slightly inconvenienced by the rush of words that tumbled like a waterfall off of his tongue. "Since it's my birthday and all, I thought we could have breakfast together and—" "What exactly is a birthday? I saw some in your memories, but I'm not too clear on what they're supposed to be for," Raziel asked when she came into view. She sniffed the air. "Ooh, smells fantastic," and she saw his crestfallen face. "Albert? What's wrong?" Liala asked. Before Raziel could regain her composure, he immediately brought his fingers to his lips. "Shh," he said. "My mother must be here. She must have come back while I was asleep, then gone straight to bed." Both the angel and the demoness went stiff, as if they themselves were dead, and Liala came close to him. She moved her hand to reach out, then thought the better of it and used the gesture to awkwardly brush her hair off of her shoulders to fall behind her back instead. "Albert, why would you think that?" She asked the question with great gentleness toward him before looking over her shoulder at Raziel with a questioning raised eyebrow. "How should I know?" Raziel's tight-lipped and steady stare asked in return. "Because there were 4 plates and 4 cups, and they were all used. You 2 plus Lisa makes 3. Nobody else is going to come here. Dad's gone, so that leaves only," he raised a single finger of his right hand, "one person. My mother." "It is elementary, my dear angel." "By the 12 circles, my memory wipe. He doesn't remember dinner, and we didn't get rid of his plate." "Of course he thinks. What have I done?" "He's going to be crushed." Raziel closed her eyes to hide the flow of remorse. "This is what you get." She told herself, as if in her own mind, she was already watching the heartbreak on his face when the woman who raised him failed to appear. Liala, to her credit, immediately recognized her sister's thoughts and rushed to distract Albert before he could realize anything was wrong. "So, what's a birthday?" "You still haven't said." "It's like a party or something, isn't it?" She prompted and walked past him. Without thinking about it, he followed after her to speak. She reached for the creamer, poured it into a cup, and handed it to him before pouring creamer into the other cup for herself. "Oh, I didn't, did I?" Albert asked. "It's simple. We keep track of the day we're born, and every year on that day we celebrate that that person was born. They get presents, people sing songs, dance, and play games." "Songs?" "We have songs back home, but the only really happy ones involve either sex or alcohol or both. Except for the dances, usually those lead to sex or alcohol, though. Are birthdays like that?" "Can you tell me one of those songs?" Liala pressed. "Sure, there's this one. It's called the birthday song, and there's a whole lot of variations. People try to add their own nonsensical lines to go with the original lyrics, but it's all about making good wishes for somebody's future, like having many more and never being poor and... Well, why don't I hum a few bars and then sing a couple of lines, huh?" Albert cheered up a little as Liala nodded along with him, and he quietly sang the song in a somewhat off-key attempt at a tenor until his voice cracked a little at the end. "It's been a while since I've heard that one, but everybody knows how it goes." Albert cracked a weak, encouraging smile and finally ran entirely out of words, so he began to ramble. Cake is the best. When I was little, my parents told me I smushed my whole face in one and got more of it on me than in me. I can't really remember that one, not clearly, but obviously I got better at eating, but it's still been a long time since I've had a cake. It's just not the same when there's nobody around who's glad you are. He snorted. I mean, my mom is, I know. She said lots of times I helped her survive, but work and sleep. She hasn't had time for a birthday in the last 2 years, and as he spoke, Raziel recalled the march of his memories. Right, that was in there, of course. How do you forget? And these are big deals. And today is the day of those other parties. Raziel acted without thinking. She cast her spell, and the shape of a youthful succubus was gone. In her place, still clad in nightclothes, stood a woman of nearly 40, with honey-blonde hair and steady, calm eyes, a few stray freckles on her face like the finishing touches of an artist. "Albert," Raziel said, and Albert turned around. His knees felt weak and he lost all breath. "Here, this is more like it," Raziel said, and cleared her throat. Her voice was a perfect imitation of the woman in Albert's memories. She took a step closer to him. His chin began to quiver. You look so much like her." Raziel couldn't think of a quip to say, nor a joke to give, nothing to lighten the mood of either him or herself. The weight of her actions, all of them, crashed down on her shoulders like a mountain. As if to support herself, she approached him and put her hands on his shoulders. "Albert, a few months ago, a wayward pair of unlucky fools stranded themselves here. No home, no money, no knowledge, and no future. You fed us out of your pocket, sheltered us from everyone and everything that might hurt us, gave us clothing and a place to sleep, took care of us when we were too weak to even move. We can't give you anything now, except our friendship. We don't celebrate birthdays back where we're from, but I can say this." She yanked him hard into her embrace. "We're very glad you were born. Very, very glad."